Welcome to the Kaiser Report. I'm Max Kaiser. You know, according to official statements, the Federal Reserve Bank has been making giant strides, performing eye-catching miracles and exploits day by day. Oh, wait, no, that was North Korea. My bad. Stacey?
Yes, that was a statement read by North Korea when they allegedly let off an H-bomb, a hydrogen bomb. And it sounded, of course, similar in my ears to what the likes of CNBC would say about when the Fed announced QE1 and then QE2 and then QE3 and then QE4. It's like, yay, these are mighty weapons against the evil market forces that would try to say our markets are worth less than what they should be.
Well, North Korea doesn't have a central bank on the par of a European central bank or a Federal Reserve Bank, so they must resort to nuclear weapons.
We've had quite a remarkable opening to this new year. We've had oil prices crash. Like in one day, they crashed 5.6% to below $35. That was back to 2004 levels, so even worse than during this the 2008-2009 crash. And also, speaking of crashes, when we had the 2007 to 2009, a lot of people forget about the year 2007. And
I totally forgot about it. It's a blank.
January
gone.
Well, if you can remember it, then you didn't live through it for real. So 2007, January 2007, we saw massive declines in China, huge drops in one day, up to 10%.
Really?
Yeah, and you actually were on the call to go on the news about that. You were on France 24. You went and talked about it.
No, it's all coming back
They used to
now.
call it the liquidity crisis, and then in 2008, it transformed into the subprime crisis. But first, it was the liquidity crisis. There were all sorts of ructions going on in the bond and stock markets that were signaling something bad was coming. So we've had two circuit breaker days in China so far in this first week of the new year. So that was down over 7%, and they stopped all trading, halt all trading. On Thursday, within half an hour, they had to shut the markets because it was down over 7%. So with this, CNBC went to speak to Richard Fisher, who is a former Dallas Fed chief, not to be confused with Stanley Fisher, who's the vice chairman of the Fed, but he was on CNBC, and the headline reads, "We front-loaded a tremendous market rally. Former Fed president admits, warns no ammo left." Perhaps the most shocking of mea culpas seen in modern financial history, former Dallas Fed head Richard Fisher unleashed some seriously uncomfortable truthiness during a 5-minute confessional interview on CNBC. While talking heads attempt to blame China for recent U.S. market volatility, Fisher explains it is not China, it is the Fed that is at fault. What the Fed did, and I was part of it, was front-loaded an enormous market rally in order to create a wealth effect. And an uncomfortable digestive period is likely now. Simply put, he concludes, there can't be much more accommodation. The Fed is a giant weapon that has no ammunition left. And he's saying, basically, get out of the markets, stay all cash.
What does Bankster Rat say? Ha ha ha, told you so, told you so, told you so. This is an interesting use of language here. He says they front-loaded the markets. What does that mean? Remember that when the bankers were caught committing financial fraud, the response by policymakers was to write a check to them for $15 trillion to bail out their fraud. And during the last 7 years, they took that money that was handed to them as a reward for committing crimes. And banks like JP Morgan and others have had to pay hundreds of billions of dollars because they've committed crimes. And they used that money to do everything that was leading up to the crash originally in terms of abusing markets with leveraged bets without any collateral. They expanded that by 50 to 60 times. So now the debt in the globe is 200 trillion plus. The amount of money on, let's say, an exchange like the silver or gold-backed markets in New York, they have 300 to 350 times leverage based on what they actually have in the vaults. So in other words, all they did was they gave them the green light to create, over the past 7 years, the same situation as 2008, but on a much bigger scale. Why did they do that? Because that $15 trillion in gift, you take 1% of that or so as a fee, and that went into the pockets of the kleptocracy, the bankers,
yes,
the banksters. And like Bankster Rat. Bankster Rat started out as just a little rat, but over the 7 years, thanks to central bank policies, he's a monster rat. He's going to become even a bigger monster rat because the central bankers reward what I would, without any compunction, refer to as financial terrorism.
We've all talked about that. We know it's financial terrorism, but let's talk about what this guy has said, Richard Fisher.
Yes.
So you're talking about bankster rat, where this is like that pizza rat in New York,
yes.
grabbing somebody's food and bringing it into his little cave below to save for the future. Well, what the bankster rats have done the opposite. Bankism, central banks, Richard Fisher, Stanley Fisher, all these guys running the central bank, they've front-loaded, as he said, front-loaded. That means the future's gonna have to pay. You could draw forward, you could put everything on your credit card, you could act like you could draw forward your income for the next 5 years by spending it all today on a credit card. But that means you don't have income for the next 5 years because it all has to go towards your credit card.
Front load equals back consequence.
Yeah, future consequence. So there's always going to be a consequence. However, with CNBC, just like those North Korean news presenters who are reading about their mighty exploits and all this sort of stuff, a lot of financial press came to believe, especially since it worked over and over, all the way down from 20% interest rates down to 0%. It always worked when the central bank did this. So they began to believe that, yes, our central banks are mighty and they can control markets. So here we turn back to Richard Fisher. I'm going to start a little bit with his clip at the very end where he talks about the only thing that in the past year that has returned anything has been cash. And then look at the response from the CNBC correspondent.
The only asset that really returned anything last year, again, if you take away dividends, believe it or not, was cash. It's 0.1%.
Yes.
That's a very unusual circumstance.
This is, Mr. Fisher, this has been an absolutely extraordinary interview. For you to come on here and for you to say I was one of the central bankers who engineered the front loading of the banks. We did it to create a wealth effect. And then to go on and tell us with a big smile on your face that we're overpriced, which was the word that you used in the market, that there would be some digestive problems. Are you guys going to take the rap if there is a serious correction in this market? Will you equally come on and say, I'm really sorry, we overinflated the market, which is a logical conclusion from what you've said so far in this interview?
All right, so here you have a mea culpa. They admit, like what I've been saying all along, that this money printing was just a giveaway, that it didn't work, it didn't have the effect. It was, in fact, didn't cause any inflation, and it was a complete catastrophic loss.
But let's look at the fact what we're talking about here is the propaganda. This CNBC guy for the last 10 years has believed that the central banks can control markets. We here on the Kaiser Report have been telling you over and over that this is not going to work, that this is a Ponzi scheme, that this is just front-loading,
that this is front-loading. Right, the propaganda was that this money printing would cause inflation to create enough tax revenue to pay down all the debt.
Yeah.
But and then Paul Krugman of the New York Times, for example, would say, we need to print more money because you need to create that inflation to pay down the debt. Now, is Paul Krugman of the New York Times going to come out and publicly apologize for being a charlatan? The guy who he's been supporting, Fisher, just basically stabbed Krugman in the back and said, this guy Krugman's been lying to you for 7 years. He's a charlatan. And that all we've been doing has been front-loading. That is to say, we've been bailing out our friends, and it's been a catastrophe, and now we don't care.
We've been front-loading, meaning somebody in the future is going to pay for it. Not only that, but the past year, 2015, has been the most remarkable in terms of the expansion of central bank balance sheets from the U.S. to the European Central Bank to the Bank of Japan. They've expanded their balance sheets. Bank of Japan has gone bonsai. They've gone crazy. They've gone bonkers. They've expanded their balance sheet enormously in the past year. And yet, the thing that returned the most, as Richard Fisher said, was cash at 0.1%, which is remarkable. And yet, over and over, and you see that in the comments on our YouTube version of this show, you'll see people say, you were wrong, the Fed is in control, the Fed is mighty, the Fed is as powerful as Kim Jong-un in controlling...
Right, the propaganda is so effective that these people that are getting stabbed by this guy like Fisher, they believe the propaganda. This is the power of propaganda. It's central bank propaganda.
It's
People
central
don't
bank
understand that central
propaganda,
bankers
but it also causes
spew
misallocation of wealth, because here a lot of people, whether it's that CNBC presenter or people leaving comments in this video or people allocating capital for their future, they think this can go on. But the Fed is knowing, while they're doing this, that it's just front-loading. It's drawing forward your future income. So you think, however, you don't know this. You don't know that most ordinary people don't understand that this means for the next 5 years, your income is going to be down. And this is what he says in the entire interview. It's like that this is basically we're going to have to not grow for the next 5 years.
Right. Well, they said that we're going to bypass, we're going to go around the law.
Yeah.
We're going to break all the laws, because we need to do that to jumpstart the economy, to front load the economy. Well, it failed. But we still have all the law breaking. There's been no rule of law. And then you have an economy and a society in America where this front loading has created this enormous wealth and income gap, given rise to social unrest, given rise to groups like Black Lives Matter that have a legitimate beef because their lives have been destroyed by the likes of Fisher.
There has been natural law. Natural law will always happen because markets will always rebalance. They could, create dams and try to contain all the damage, but it's always going to fall apart. Now, I want to talk to another accidental truthiness. Because Richard Fisher tried to draw it back, saying, "Well, I didn't vote for this." When this British guy,
like the firing squad guy, who says, "Well, my gun was blank."
So here in the UK, there was an accidental Freudian sort of slip by the Prime Minister during PMQs, and his Freudian slip was tweeted word for word by the Conservative Party on Twitter. And then they all had to erase this because what the Prime Minister said is, as ITV pointed out, PM's embarrassing gaffe in Parliament is tweeted word for word by his own press office. Here's his tweet. "Since I became PM, income equality has fallen. It went up under Labour." So they tweeted this accidental. This is the truth. This is caused partly by the government's austerity and fiscal policies, but what is the larger thing is the bankism, is the central banks, is the front loading.
He's been a party to financial fraud. But what does the news here cover? They covered the fact that their little British astronaut up in space soiled himself, apparently, or
I hadn't heard this.
he pooped in his spacesuit or something, and that was the big story in Britain. Not that the fact that the Prime Minister has been financing terrorism. No, that's not the story, believe it or not. Here in the UK, it's about space poop. Well, it's the most hermetically sealed propaganda bubble in the world is the United Kingdom, more so than North Korea.
Well,
if you can,
exactly.
It's unbelievable, but it's
here
true.
North Korea sets off an H-bomb allegedly, or some sort of nuclear bomb. They issue statements saying this is grand, this is great, this is not a catastrophe. It is a catastrophe, just like in the Fed or the ECB or the Bank of Japan. They set off nuclear financial bombs and say it's a great thing for us.
All right, well, in the second half, we're talking with Dan Collins about China and North Korea. I'm looking forward to it. He's great. Thank you.
Boom. That's a Stacey H bomb.
Stay tuned for the second half. A whole lot more. Welcome back to the Kaiser Report. I'm Max Kaiser. Time now to go to Memphis, Tennessee, to talk with Dan Collins of the China Money Report and owner of the Memphis City soccer team. Dan, welcome back to the Kaiser Report.
Thanks, Max. Great to be back.
All right, Dan Collins, you've written an amazing piece on your site called "The U.S. and Chinese Wages Have Converged." So we've been talking about this for years, that this would happen. I guess it has happened. So welcome to the $12,000 a year annual pay packet. This is pretty remarkable, so tell us about it.
Yeah, this is a piece I wrote talking about the convergence of the wages, which has been absolutely stunning. When I moved to China in 1998, nobody would ever think wages would increase in China, massive unemployment. We went through phases, so there's so many jobs created in China that eventually they run out of labor. It's very difficult to find manufacturing labor in China today. So what I did on the piece, I talk about from 2011 to 2015, comparing China and the United States in terms of wages, in terms of jobs growth. United States, basically, every economic statistic has become an illusion now. Things like unemployment, we claim 5% or less unemployment. We have 100 million people, though, of working age that don't work. So how do you really make that equation? But we do have some job growth in the United States from 2011 to 2015. I always look at the total number of people employed from the government data, the non-farm payroll data. We basically went the entire Bush administration without creating jobs. We had 132 million people working.
Yeah, but wait, let me jump in here, Dan, because there are a lot more jobs. But as we're pointing out here, the wages themselves are declining. And let's talk about one area, one fulcrum, if you will, where this all happens. Let's take a company like Walmart, for example, where a lot of the manufactured goods in China end up in Walmart, but those manufactured goods are being manufactured at the expense of American jobs. This conduit to Walmart is enabled by China manipulating or pegging their currency. So I've said for years that for people who shop at Walmart and they save some money on the on their stuff being manufactured in China. That's great. However, you're killing your job. You know, you're killing your society, you're killing your economy. Now it appears as though that day has arrived. The Chinese worker, the American worker, thanks to Walmart, thanks to Wall Street's market manipulations, thanks to artificially pegging their currency to the dollar, we now have an incredibly poor section, permanently underclass in America, as we predicted, Dan.
Everything you said is absolutely true. You know, in addition, we have not only an entire class of people, but we have an entire generation, which is Generation Y, who are going to be working for those $12,000 annual pay packets. You know, on the flip, China is not the only one. Walmart's not the only one. People don't realize everything in the United States is made in China. There's not much that's made in the United States anymore. A lot of reasons for that, many of which you just mentioned. But there's also the 40% corporate tax rate, second highest in the world, next to North Korea. And nobody's going to put a plant in the United States anymore and get stuck in a 40% tax rate. You know, these Silicon Valley giants we're all proud of, they pay tax whatever they want to pay, which is very, very low numbers.
Right, they park most of their cash out of the country, and they have no tax liability. Apple Computer being probably the biggest offender on that one, with hundreds of billions of dollars of cash just parked out of the country. They don't want to pay tax. So again, it totally destroys the fabric of society. And you have unrest all over America, riots breaking out, class war breaking out because of the Apple Computers and the Walmarts of the world. Now, over the past several decades, Dan, the Far East Asian countries have devalued their currencies by buying massive quantities of treasuries. Okay, that's what we're talking about. They artificially keep their currencies cheap to keep this kind of export market going. But now we seem to be entering a period where this is reversing, because these countries are now net sellers of U.S. treasuries. What's going on there?
This is really a generational shift. I mean, we have lived under the system of 2 decades of China, Japan, Korea buying U.S. treasuries. China got up to $4 trillion only like 16 months ago. They peaked at $4 trillion, 3.99 something. Since that time, they've sold off 14% of the total market. They've sold $500 billion in treasuries over the last year. We may be going to a point now to where, now that these countries want to keep their currencies stronger, there's no need to buy those treasuries, and they recycle those trade surpluses with the U.S. in other ways, especially mergers and acquisitions. We see Chinese companies now buying up everything across the world. So yeah, we're going to a point where there's going to be much, much lower demand for U.S. treasuries from our foreign trading partners.
Right, but this transition going on in China appears to be hitting some rocky shoals, in that the markets are crashing. You know, you had a limit down day of 7% on more than one occasion, and there seems to be a lot of volatility out there. Money's moving into Bitcoin, of course, and Startcoin, because there are refuges. They are safe haven currencies at this point, gold and silver as well. So my question is, isn't there a price to pay for this so-called transition? You're going to enter an incredibly volatile period, yes?
Well, as the Chinese proverb says, may you live in interesting times. We're no doubt living through that now. We're going to experience more. Chinese stock market has started the year almost down 20%. We've had 2 down limit days of over 7% that have triggered the circuit breakers. But a lot of this is just sell off from the bubble that was created last year. The market went up from 2,600 to 5,000 in a year and a half. It's now crashed down to 3,100 today. I think we're getting close to bottom on the market. You could probably see the government going to do everything to come in and try to support it. Eventually, that's a futile exercise. But yeah, we've got so much money printing out there and mispriced market signals that capitalism is not really functioning anymore the way it should, and we're going to all pay the price with chaos going forward.
But and the American worker, because they supported Walmart, can now be getting a terrible wage and dealing with this volatility. So now let's change gears for a second, because it's also been announced that China is halting all new coal-powered fire plants. The Telegraph newspaper in London calls China the new alternative energy powerhouse. So this is a different part of the whole Chinese story right now. Obviously, they have days in Chinese cities where they have to shut down the entire city due to air pollution. This is an emergency. This is great urgency. So they're making a move toward green energy, alternative energy. What's going on, Dan?
Absolutely, and it's about time, I could say. Living in Chinese cities, you get the feeling you're living in fishbowl with somebody breathing smoke into it. I mean, it's absolutely horrendous weather. This year, they had red alerts across 10 cities already this winter, where they literally tell people, go in your home. And then they shut down all the plants. I mean, it's really living in like 19th century London, you know, with the kind of pollution. But yeah, finally they have the plans. They've increased wind power 70 times over the last decade. Solar power is up 300% over a decade. So those are although those are from very low bases, yeah, they are becoming the world's alternative energy leader. And I believe their projections by 2050 is to have 85% of energy come from alternatives. So this would be absolutely. China's also signed on to new climate change agreements, so that they're getting on board with this. So this is all good news, not only for China but for the planet.
All right, Dan Collins, you have also spent a lot of time in your career in North Korea. So you've got an interesting insight into North Korea, because speaking of energy, before you moved to China, you spent some time in North Korea. Tell us what's going on with this alleged H-bomb test, and what is the mainstream media missing, if anything?
Well, I assume the Kim family's neglected for attention with all the focus on the Middle East and the showdown between Japan and China. He wants to let people know he's still out there. They just detonated a plutonium bomb, which is a big step up.
Plutonium bomb is that an H bomb, a hydrogen bomb? Where does it fit into the bombing scale?
It's a bomb that can be packed in a much smaller warhead. So North Korea has capable ballistic missiles to get those to the west coast of the United States, and that's why it kind of woke people up.
Okay,
over
so
here.
isn't that an existential threat then?
No, it absolutely is. I mean, these guys are. We also have 20,000 American soldiers in the Seoul area that we use as first strike pawns, and so they don't strike Seoul, because if you strike Seoul, you take out all those American soldiers, and you automatically got war with the United States.
Seoul, is a target, a possible target? I mean, you're saying that North Korea could target South Korea?
Oh yeah, Seoul would be the first target. It's 70 miles away across the border, and that's the first target. That's most of you take out Seoul, you take out South Korea. That's 40%, 50% of the GDP of the country.
You got to cut it off there. Thanks for being on the Kaiser Report.
Thanks a lot, Max.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Kaiser Report with me, Max Kaiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Dan Collins of the must-read China Money Report. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Kaiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.